Hey everyone, welcome to Cracked with Siobhan Harris. Now, sometimes with success, there comes a point in an artist's journey, at least I think we hope so, where your name becomes more than a name. It's like it no longer belongs to you, but instead represents the product that you're selling or whatever it is that you're making. A great example of this is Debbie Bean. Now, when I started my stained glass journey, the name Debbie Bean, at least in my West Coast bubble, had become synonymous with gorgeous, modern, geometric stained glass rainbows. Her work was truly the tip of the spear for hip and minimal stained glass that people born after 1985 actually wanted to have in their home. Today, I'm going to chat with Debbie, the person behind the art, to find out how she went from being in her late 30s, feeling burnt out on supporting everyone else's dreams, to running the successful, globally recognized brand that she is today. Join me as I crack it all wide open. Hi, Debbie.
Hello, hello.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning. I know it's only 9 a.m. on the West Coast and it's lunchtime here. So I don't know. Are you an early person? Are you a morning person?
I have become a morning person. I back in the day was definitely very nocturnal, and I feel like the combination of like running my own business and having 3 cats, I don't sleep in. So I've been up and at 'em since before 7 this morning.
Okay, good. I feel a little less bad then.
Oh yeah, no, I'm like 9 a.m. I'm like, oh, that's halfway through my day. It's fine.
Okay, cool. So, when I started doing stained glass, immediately from the moment I laid my hands on glass and started doing it, I knew it was something I was going to be doing for a very long time. I wanted to dedicate my life to it in a very big way. And so, I learned from my mother-in-law over a weekend out of town on a trip to their house. And I came back to Los Angeles and I signed up for classes at the Pasadena Stained Glass Supply.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's where you took classes as well.
Yeah.
And so because I was already so sure of what I wanted to do with glass and how I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm moving forward as a stained glass artist. I was very open about that and discussed it with my fellow students and teachers. And the main teacher, which I cannot remember her name. Do you remember her name? The blonde lady? Donna. Yes, right? That was it. Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. Okay. So I remember telling Donna, I want to be, this is what I'm doing. And she was like, oh, have you heard of Debbie Bean? And I was like, no, I haven't. And she was like, oh, well, she's a stained glass artist. And here's some of her stuff. And that was probably the first of 1,000 times I heard your name. Anytime I said, yeah, I'm working on stained glass and this is what I really want to focus on now, it'd be like, oh, like Debbie Bean, Debbie Bean, Debbie Bean, Debbie Bean, Debbie Bean. It was just like, no, I'm not like Debbie Bean, but I was so impressed and curious about how you got to a place where your name is global. Yeah. It's become the brand. Mm-hmm. And I know that took a lot of work. I know that didn't happen overnight. So I really want you to talk to me today about how you got to where you are now.
It's so crazy. Like, I just don't see myself that way. So like so you telling me that, like, oh, your name keeps coming up, like, it's a little mind-boggling for me. Because I'm just so like, I'm a little bit tunnel vision with just like, I just focus on my work so much. Yeah. I do think that some of it is I was very fortunate that when I came back to stained glass, because I had done it, not at all professionally, but I did it when I was a kid briefly. And when similar to you, when I was like, oh, I'll just do this like as a hobby, like instantly was like, oh, no, this is what I need to be doing every day.
Can you tell us a little bit about your career before you did stained glass. So I know you're from Woodland Hills, right? You're from the
Yeah.
Valley,
Mm-hmm.
which for our
I'm a Valley
listeners,
girl.
for our listeners that don't know much about the Los Angeles area, it's just north of Los Angeles proper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. When I get really excited, my likes come out a lot, and it becomes really obvious that, like, oh my God, I grew up in the Valley. And there was like zero going on in the Valley when I was growing up. And but my parents did have stained glass in their house,
mm,
and we had to replace. We had this really big panel in our bathroom door, and we had to replace it. And they actually replaced it with that like faux stained glass where it's just like, I don't know, where it's like film, whatever overlay.
yes.
But they allowed me to kind of help design it. And it was like my first experience arguing with someone and being like, no, this is how the design should be. And this is how I see it. And they didn't understand my vision. And like, we made a compromise. And like, to this day, I've like told my parents, like, I want to redo it because I didn't like their design
It's
choices.
still there.
Oh yeah. I mean, and mind you, like I'm 45. I was like 10 years old when this happened. And I was like, no, the rosebuds need to be closed. And he's like, no, but they would be open. I'm like, no. But visually, 10 years old, this was me. So I don't know, like, I just feel like stained glass, like, and designing stained glass clearly was just like in my blood from like a very young age. And then, when I was a teenager, I was like, typical like punk rock kid who ditched school. And like, again, I can't stress this enough, like growing up in the Valley, like I was such a weirdo. Like, I like one of these girls, not like the other. So I never went to class, but I wanted to graduate, so I had to take some night classes, and there was a stained glass class, and I was like, oh, I like that. So that was what I did. And I really fell in love with doing it. Never thought it would be my career because I fell in love with photography. And so, my like 20s and 30s, I did that thing of like, I didn't believe that it was possible for me to make a living as an artist. And my dad's a CPA. And so I grew up in his office. And so what I would do is I constantly would find myself like in the supporting role for other artists, whether it was, I was a studio manager for a photographer when I lived in New York. I was a personal assistant for like a rock star at one point when I was living in LA. Like I then was like helping like small businesses run their business. And like I had a lot of like fun, exciting things that happened. Like when I was doing like my photography, I just couldn't do it commercially. I had such like the artist mentality, and I couldn't make that jump, even though like I photographed a lot of the bands, like in the freak folk scene when I was living in Brooklyn. Like I photographed a lot of those guys, and like I went on tour with them. So I did a lot of fun things in between, like basically being like studio managers for different artists. And I have to say, I think a big part of it was my husband's a software engineer. And so he doesn't think like, oh my God, my art. And don't you understand? Like there's none of that. And he saw like some of my old portfolio, and he just looked at me and he was like, why aren't you doing this? Like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, you don't understand. We have these things called bills and we need to pay them. And like, this is not something that's happening. And he basically was like, you're really unhappy. Just go do something that you love. And that's what led me to going back and being like, well, I really loved stained glass when I was younger. Maybe I'll just take a class, and for a couple hours every week, I'll do something artistic. And that was really as far as like my business plan had gone. Like there was nothing. And I think similar to you, what ended up happening is like the moment I cut like my first piece of glass, I was just like, oh my God, it was like I could breathe again. And it was just like I reconnected like with that childhood love, and was just like, oh, this is what's been missing. And we were living in Tahunga at the time, and we were living in this little craftsman house that had like a little detached like shed. It might have been a garage. It was teeny tiny. Like there's no way it could have been that. So, and Greg built me a workbench, and that was going to be our studio, which was our studio for like a day. And then he came in a few days later, and I had taken over the whole workbench, and I was like, what? Like, this is like what I do now. And I think that also, I think two things like really fueled like my like insanity in running my business. And one was like I had spent so many years just like doing things that I didn't love. And also I was just, we had bills to pay, and I didn't feel comfortable having him take on the financial responsibility of everything. And so I actually sat down, went through our finances, and figured out how we could go from like a double income household to single. And, the answer was, okay, we don't go out, we don't shop, we don't go on vacation, we don't do anything. And I just get to work. And that like level, I just took that so seriously. And basically, I kind of gave myself in the back of my mind, like, okay, I have 6 months to see if this is going to work out. And if it doesn't, then I'm just going to go back to like, I don't know, figuring it out some other way that makes sense, and doing like business management, really boring stuff. So so yeah, like I was saying, like, so cut to, I just started posting things on Instagram. I also, the benefit of living in Los Angeles, it was when like these like craft fairs were really starting to happen more. And I just applied to all of them, and I didn't expect to get into any of them. And I thought, well, if I get into one or two, that will be great. And I just kept getting into them. And so what that did for me is that, again, it sort of like was putting accelerant on my business, because it's one thing to like just be in your studio and like you make things and you're isolated from people, and like you're just like posting stuff on Instagram. And like now I know people like use TikTok and a million other things, but like, what this forced me to do was like to go out and see how people respond to my work, like, oh, I had to think about packaging. I had to think about like, oh, I should put a hang tag. Like I didn't have hang tags, like all these things that like I might not have thought about. I really had to think about. And, even when I started my business, I wanted to make it so that like there was sort of like no turning back for me. And it's why I used my name, and I didn't have like a brand name. Like I wanted it to be clear that whatever I did, this was me, like my work is a reflection of me. I'm the artist, the creative director, the designer, the manufacturer. Like I'm everything. Like now I have people that I work with, but and it sort of was like for me, like getting rid of, like there was no training wheels, like there was nothing for me to fall back on. Like I just kept putting, honestly, a lot of pressure on myself to like just make this happen. And so, for every time I would have an event, like the first event I did, I didn't have inventory, I didn't have anything. So I had to like just like work and like create inventory, and then like I saw like what people responded to. And like for me in the beginning, I really wanted to do like large scale work, like who doesn't? And what the feedback was, oh my God, I love what your work is. I love what you're doing. And one day when I can afford it, I'd love to buy something, which was very sweet, but I wasn't going to be able to pay my bills.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know this was probably like a conversation that he doesn't even think of or remember, but years ago when I was living in Brooklyn, actually it was or I might have still been living in Manhattan at the time, but anyway, I was living in New York, and for Thanksgiving, I went to this artist, Dan Witz. I went to his house for Thanksgiving, and he's like a really famous like street artist and painter. And like his work has now been like used for like Dior, like he's huge. And even at that time, he was a really big deal. And he sort of lamented on the fact that none of his friends could afford his work. And so he had made these like little stickers so people could have something tangible of his art, even though, he's shown like in galleries worldwide. And so I think that like, I kind of always go back to that conversation. And so when people said to me sort of the same thing on clearly a much smaller level, but the response was, I love your work, I can't afford it. I looked at like these larger pieces I did, and everything I do is geometric. And so I extrapolated from these larger designs, smaller work that I like, smaller designs within it. So for me, it was still retaining like this larger sense of like what I saw visually, but like a small element of it that I felt stood alone on itself. And that's how I basically came up with this like smaller, affordable line of work for people. And I had spent so much of like my adult life not having money as well. And so I always try to be really mindful of when I'm pricing things, that I want to have things that are attainable for people while still also having it make sense for me financially, right? And I think that like figuring out price points can be confusing for people because they don't understand overhead. They don't understand the business aspect of it. And I think that growing up, with a father that's an accountant and like seeing how businesses are run, I understood from the beginning, like me pricing like a sun catcher at $35 was like, I just remember like people being like, oh, that seems like a lot of money. And I'm like, it's not. I'm like, because the amount of time, the materials, my utilities, like everything else that went into a small triangle, it like there's so much behind the scenes, and with my work, I think what people respond to is that I'm really into like, when I first saw like the Bauhaus artwork when I was younger, I had already been doing drawings and I'd been doing stuff on my computer, like Microsoft Paint, like really rudimentary designs. But the kind of work I've always done is very geometric. And so when I got older and started seeing that there were these artists that actually had been doing it before me, it didn't influence the work I did. It sort of gave me license to say like, oh, this is actually valid. Like I'm not the only one that finds something calming and like relatable with like basic forms and shapes. And so, I think that's why people again also really respond to my work, because I really like, I think that when you're doing something so simple, you have to be really intentional with it. And you have to have the execution be like really spot on. And so it's why I don't do copper foil for my work. And it's why I use really small lead work, because I wanted everything to be very precise. And so I think, and so that's sort of how, my name really went out there. And then in terms of like the wholesale aspect of it, I got really comfortable with rejection and non-responses from people. Like
Interesting.
you name it, like every store imaginable, I emailed every single store. Hi, I'm Debbie Bean. This is what I do. Hi, I'm Debbie Bean. This is what I do. No? Okay. Hi, I'm Debbie Bean. Hi, I'm checking back in with you. Hello. I will be stalking you.
Hey,
And
I
like,
just wanted to circle back. I feel like
yeah,
that's like the sentence I start with a lot. I'm just circling back. It's
yeah.
like, no.
Now, and there are stores that I'm not joking, it would take me 2-3 years to get my work into their shop, or they don't even know that I reached out to them. And then like 5 years later, hi, I love your work. I'd like to have you in my store. And I think it's just so much of it on my end is I've just been really tenacious and really persistent, and not taking any kind of rejection personally. like I just got like a really thick skin for like, oh, that store I love doesn't know I exist, like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
like,
Well, right now, I looked at your website. You have over 50 stores that stock you. 30 of them are US stores. You're also international, Canada, Japan, the
mhm,
Netherlands. Um, so you've figured it out. You figured out the
yeah,
wholesale market. You've also said a few things that I really want to I want to circle back
yeah,
and touch on. One is that when you started, you were willing to make sacrifices,
hmm,
right? You were like, we're not
hmm,
going to go out, we're not going to eat
hmm,
out, we're going to buy groceries. And I think that that's really important for somebody to hear
hmm,
that's just starting out, that has lofty goals. I think you got to
hmm,
know that you can't do it all. You got to like make some sacrifices at the
yeah,
beginning. The second thing that you mentioned was you set these short-term goals ahead of you. You would apply to these craft shows
hmm,
um, and not have the inventory for them, but see if you got accepted. And then that would give you a specific outline of what you needed to do
hmm,
between where you were and where you needed to go. And I
hmm,
think that's really important too. And the third thing that you said, which was you have to be persistent. And
hmm,
if you have a no, it doesn't mean anything. There's
hmm,
so many stores. There's so many other doors and windows you can knock on. You just have
yeah,
to keep going.
yeah. Yes.
Yes, to all that.
It's also why I always mention my husband because and this is like I don't know if it's a pet peeve of mine or what, but like, it's like everyone reads these stories about like, oh my God, how did you start your business? And they're like, it was just me in my garage and my husband's money or my family or my trust. It was just me and my trust fund. You know what I
Oh,
mean? And like,
brother.
and it's like finances are a very personal thing and I get that, but I don't want to be disingenuous about the fact that like, yeah, I'm married, like, like I had someone who was willing to make a sacrifice with me. I know other people have like, used their savings or, in the beginning, I did have some small jobs I was still doing. And it was funny. They actually very quickly like fell away. And that was like never like getting work was never an issue. And so for me, if anything, it was sort of like, oh, the universe or whatever was just like, no, 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 this is what you should be focusing on. And there was definitely, I will say there was definitely a few times in the beginning where I was just like, I'd look at like how little money I was making. And I would go back to Greg and be like, okay, I'm quitting. This isn't fair to you. And he was like, nope, keep doing it, keep doing it. And I
Mm.
was like, okay, okay. And I launched my website in August of 2014. And I had my first, and holiday time is, it's like the big money making time for any kind of like small business. And I had, which is so laughable, my numbers now, like I would be like in tears today. But I had in my mind a successful December. I mean, I literally would go to yoga and have stained glass in my trunk, and like people would come after class and I'd, be like, this is what I have. Do you want any of this? Like I was like
Yes.
driving work to people's homes. Like
Oh my
I was like
gosh.
doing events. Like I really was like, I was just like anything like you want it, I'm gonna make it
Yeah.
happen.
That
And
reminds me of
it,
like coming out of clubs in Hollywood and having somebody like sell CDs out of the back of
yeah,
their trunk, like
exactly.
pulled up in front.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like I had no shame. Like I didn't care. And it was that and because it went well, I had like that moment. I'm like, oh, I think I can do this. And then of course, January happens and you're like, wait, where did you all
Crickets.
go? Where did
Yeah.
you all go? And so then I would have to be like, okay, like, you have to learn like the cycles of like people's like buying habit. Like there's a lot to understand in depending on what, it's also like depending on what kind of business you want. Like I think there's like all those things that like for me, again, I think because I was older, there were a lot of things that like I knew I just didn't want to do. Like working 7 days a week, I was fine with that. Like I don't care. Like I had no problem doing that. But like my had a and this is the part where I get emotional. I had a senior dog, and it was really important for me to be able to take care of him. And so like working from home enabled me to like take care of like my very old little chihuahua.
I have a dog who's 18 right now, so I'm literally like,
My little boy lived until he was 18, and like, like I don't know how I did it, because like literally like around the clock care for him. But like that's what was important for me, was to take care. Like I didn't want to have a job that like I was away from him, so I created a career so I could take care of my dog. You know what I mean? Like that's what was, I don't have my children I always joke, my children all have tails. Like I don't have kids, but like,
yeah,
I want to be there for my animals. So sorry.
no, it's okay.
For me, creating this like wholesale direct to consumer business, it enabled me to also do the other things that I loved. And then, I think 2 years into doing this, we actually went on a vacation, and I was just like, my eyes were rolling in the back of my head. Like I knew it was time to stop working when I would like really cut myself in the studio. I mean, like that's the other thing, like, right. We're like working with sharp objects, and, I'm working like 10, 12-hour days every day. And like the way that like, I knew it was time to like walk out of the studio was because like I was like covered in cuts, and I was like, okay, I think it's enough now. I can stop working. Like that was my idea of like work-life balance in the beginning. Like, oh, I've injured myself. Maybe I can walk away from the studio.
You're like, I have to leave because I need stitches.
Because I'm bleeding. Yeah.
How do you feel now about your work-life balance? Is it different?
Yeah. I mean, is it different? Yeah, it is different. I work a lot. I do. I work a lot. But like, again, I love what I genuine. So there's twofold, right? Like one, I love what I do. And also, I get that like, it's like a deep honor for me to make a living doing this. But that being said, I will now take a weekend off. I still do a little work. I still do a little, I say that, I'm like, that's not entirely true. But like, I started doing like radical things. Like I took my email off my phone because I realized I'm like, I deal in stained glass. I'm not a doctor. Like there are no stained glass emergencies. If you're emailing me at 9:00 at night, like I don't need to respond to that email, Yeah. But in the beginning, like every email I was like, oh my God, yes, I will have that too, and I don't do that anymore because it was too crazy making for me,
Yeah.
I wake up early in the morning. Like I'm up usually around 6:00. Sometimes my cats think that I should be awake at 5 a.m, and that's just upsetting. But usually the way I start the way I've always started my day is like I wake up, I feed all the animals. I drink my tea, and like I open up my laptop and I kind of look at like the day ahead, like what I need to do. And then like I'll walk into my studio, which is my garage. And, depending on the day, and I'm sure you've experienced that. I think people might have this notion that like, I'm just like in the studio and soldering and like making art and it's magical. And I'm like, the amount of time I spend on my computer is crazy.
It's half the work, honestly. Like some days it feels like that, where I'm like, wow, I didn't even touch glass. I literally was doing admin work all day long.
Yeah. And, so it depends. So it's like, I think the thing for me is I've learned to not be so attached to my emails. I think that was like the biggest learning lesson, is that, especially because like I said, in like one of my former lives, like I was a personal assistant for like a very famous musician. So I just was so used to like you had to respond all the time. You know what I mean? And like,
who was it? Can you tell us?
Oh yeah. I was Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots. And which is funny because like, I was never a fan of their music, which was like a conversation I had to have with him like 2 weeks into it. I was just like, so I don't live under a rock, so I obviously know who you guys are, but I never listened to your music. And he was, I had that moment of like, oh, that's why you're famous. He's like, oh, you should, it's really good. And I was like, okay. I was like, I am way too punk rock to have ever listened to Stone Temple Pilots, but went on tour with them for like a year, and everyone was great. And they were also like all super hardworking. He was a super hardworking dude. Like he woke up even when we weren't on tour and like would go into his studio. Like he was always working. And, I think a lot of like my work ethic just comes from that I've always had like really demanding jobs. I also, cause I'm a weirdo, I spent some time in the mountains with like Tibetan lamas, and like, up 6 a.m. doing your prayers, like make the tea, have your breakfast. And then, I would assist, there's one monk that I spent a lot of time with, who's like this master artist. And like, we would be painting all day. And like, really the day started at 6 a.m. and like, we would go until like 8 o'clock at night. And so like, I'm just used to understanding that like, whatever you're doing, if it's something that's important to you, I don't know an artist that doesn't work long hours. And I think that like, there's a lot of talk about like not glorifying burnout and like not glorifying like overworking. And I get that. And it's why like I did take my email off my phone, and why like I will, like I do my yoga, like I'll go for a walk, like I do other things outside of this. But that work-life balance, I think, especially when you run your own business, like it's a little hard, but I think it's very different than like if I was working for like a big corporation. Like, yeah, you have to have definite boundaries. And it's why I'm also I try to be super mindful of like my assistant and anyone that works for me. Like I really try to learn from like the bad past experiences I've had working for people.
That probably helps a lot, actually, having an assistant, having been an assistant.
Yeah, exactly. Like I really try to do things, like I really try to not do the things that like I endured. And I try to be real. Like I also always feel very fortunate. Emmy, who's been with me for several years now, she's just like a dream come true. I've had other people work in my studio. I've had people that worked briefly. I had people that just weren't the right mix, like teaching, anyone that's been in my studio, I've had to teach them how to do stained glass. And like, it's not for everyone. Because I've been doing this long enough, I'm able now to, I'm able to control a little bit more, like my output and like what I'm doing. And where I'm in the beginning, I think it's natural to feel like, oh, I have to keep doing that, because if I don't keep doing that, people will stop shopping with me, or I'll disappoint people, and it's like, newsflash, you're going to disappoint people.
Right. Yeah. No,
time.
I think honestly, like one of the things I tell myself often with all of my projects in life, whether it be personal or professional, is that you'll never get a unanimous vote. You'll never get a unanimous vote, no matter what you do.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I know I'm really good at rambling.
No, everything you've said is like so useful. And I think you've given some like really hot takes, some good hot tips about like where you need to be humble in your beginnings in terms of like selling things out of the trunk of your car, making sacrifices, like I mentioned, understanding that those luxuries of being able to set boundaries around studio time, they're going to come later.
Yeah.
But if you just stay the course, you'll get there.
I mean, my birthday is in December, and I'm Jewish. And so Hanukkah always falls at a different time. And then my husband's not Jewish. So it's like December for me, really, because November, Everyone's always shopping before Thanksgiving. So you have, for me, like all these like holidays, my birthday, like all these like big events during like my busiest time of year.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to the point where one year I just was like, I can't come to Thanksgiving because when I do, I start crying because I'm so tired and all I'm thinking is all the work I need to do. Like for years, every weekend that my birthday fell, every year that my birthday fell on a weekend was the Echo Park Craft Fair. And I worked on my birthday, there was no, oh my God, you guys, it's my birthday. Like, no. Like I worked and everyone was like, oh, isn't that awful? I was like, no, it's awesome. Because I made all my friends come to the event, and then I got to interact with like people and they were just like, oh, it's your birthday. Happy, I got all these people that got to tell me happy birthday and then give me money for my work. It was great,
Right.
but it's a lot of sacrifices. And also, I think things are also very different now. And I'm sure you've experienced it because a lot of it doesn't matter, stained glass, ceramic, painters, like you name it. Like, I think a big problem now is that, we're in the world of like Pinterest and like people just like seeing stuff and being like, oh, I can make that. Like I don't do craft fairs anymore. Partially, obviously last year, no one did them. But now I'm at a point in my business where I don't think I'll be doing them, maybe every now and then. But I'd have people come up as if I'm not sitting behind my booth or whatever and like point and like look at their friend and be like, oh, this is so great. Can you make this for me? And I'd be like, hi, I sell that. I made that. I designed that. And then they would look at me and I'm just smiling. They're like, oh, I guess you want me to buy that from you. And I'm like, or not. It's cool. Or you can just be rude and keep it moving, but like I make a living making rainbow triangles. Like I'm acutely aware of like, the fact that I make something that anyone can look at and be like, I can do that. And then they're like, look, I did a really bad version of this and now I'm trying to sell it on Etsy, I just grew up with such a like insane love for abstract artwork. Like it is the thing that like, it's the thing that just made me feel like alive and connected and, so much in the same way that like the like punk scene did for me when I was younger, where I was just like, oh, okay, I'm not a complete alien in this world. And so did, like the first time, like I saw like a Mark Rothko painting in person, where I was just like, oh my God, like this, just like the connection I had for it. So, it's a hard thing to explain to someone that doesn't come from like the art world, that like, this like sort of like distilled version of what I do, of like this very sort of like basic like geometric shapes, that there's like a much larger context and story for it. I do think that people just like intrinsically get it, which is why my work resonates with people so much, like there's just something about it that people always tell me, like they just respond to it. And I'm always like, oh, okay. It's not just me, but that being said, I just think that's like a weird thing of like people, like they learn technique and sometimes not even that, I'm like, I consider myself to always be learning, like I think I'm, my job is to constantly be a student and to constantly be playful and to constantly explore new things and to be okay with like, oh, I was doing that and like, oh, that's not how I should do that, and let me like, I picked up a bad behavior or whatever. But that's where I'm coming from, right? Like that's my approach. And I think that I can't speak for other people, I don't know what goes on in their minds, but what it seems like, at least externally, is that like People see something on interest or on Pinterest or on Instagram or wherever and are like, oh, I can make that, which like, fine, you want to make it for your house. Like, I'm like, I get it. Again, like I've been broke. I've known what it's been like to be like, oh, let me see if I can make that for myself because I can't afford it. Like that is like a completely different beast, right? It's another thing to be like, I saw this, so I made it. I now am saying I made this and I designed it and it's mine. Like that's like a really weird,
It's violating.
yeah. And it's
It's not being an artist.
yeah. And it's also, I don't know. It's weird. I try to not like seek out looking for other people that are copying my work. It's definitely, I think, a thing that we've all done where we're like, oh, what are you doing? You know? And on occasion when it's like just so over the top, and I do reach out to someone, I try to be as mindful and as kind as possible and not just come from like that place of like, oh my God, you've done this to me. Cause it's not personal, right? Like that's the thing that I've learned. Like no one is coming after me per se. I mean, even if they are, it has nothing to do with me. Like this has to do with like ignorance on their level or an insecurity or whatever it is. And so usually what I tell people is like, hey, this is actually like my work. This is how I make a living. And I know it's common in the beginning to copy other people as you're learning, but I really encourage you to find your own voice, find what it is that you love, because that's going to be so much more gratifying for you, you know, and best of luck on your journey. Because like, I don't want to wish anyone like, you know, ill will, you know, and I think that I do think that like people sometimes just don't know. And other times I've had people just be like, yeah, I don't just copy from you. I copy from a lot of people and then block me. And I'm like, okay, like, all right, like, fine, like, God bless. Like, I don't know what to say to you, you know? So, you know, and so it's why, you know, like in the beginning where you're like, oh my God, people know who you are. I think part of like what I've had to do is just sort of have almost tunnel vision because I don't want to be influenced by other people's work, you know. There was a period early on where everyone seemed to be suddenly making like, people were making like feathers or they were doing something else. I don't know what it was, but something that is nothing like the kind of work I do.
Monstera leaves.
Pardon?
Monstera leaves. There was like a bit big. Is that what it was? Yes.
Yeah, that definitely was a trend at one point, but like I had this and it was early enough on in my career. I was probably already doing it now for 2-3 years, where there was some other trend that was going on that people really seemed to be into. And it's twofold. One, it really made me kind of stop paying attention to what other people were doing. But I also had that moment of like, I'm not interested in making that kind of work. And if that's what people are really into right now, and that means that like I make less money or I like whatever, I was okay with that. Like,
yeah,
I just knew that like I've had like stores be like, oh, can you make this thing that this other person does? And I'm like, nope. I'm like, no.
no, you should probably call that person.
Yeah. Or they've been
They
like,
would be happy to hear from you.
Yeah. And that's what I've said. I'm like, I don't do other people's work or like get content. They're like, oh, well, they don't do it anymore. I'm like, okay, it's not what I do. And I think that like people are so afraid of like, oh my God, I'm going to fall out of favor. Or, oh my God, I'm not going to be popular. Or, oh my God, you know, like it's really easy. I think it's natural to like think like, oh my God, like it's all going to go away tomorrow. But you know, I just have to like be at the end of the day, like I have to like the work that I'm doing. I have to, you know, I've been doing a lot more commissions lately. And like, oftentimes when I'm done with them, I'm like, I don't want to get rid of this. You know what I mean? Like I've like, you know, it makes me like fall in love with what I'm doing. And it actually was like a unexpected positive outcome from last year was that, suddenly 2/3 of my business disappeared almost overnight, right? Like I learned early on from my dad in watching small businesses kind of, the biggest mistake they would make is like, if they were like a manufacturer or whatever, they would get like one big client because they were like, oh my God, it's so much money and I'm going to put all my energy into this one client. Well, now you're essentially just working for someone. And if they change their mind, or if it's a big store and they decide, which a lot of my friends had happened to them, like in clothing industry, where they're like, oh, this big retail chain, they canceled my order, And so I knew that going into it, they have like different streams of income. And so it's why like I did the in-person events, I did direct to consumer on my website, and I had wholesale. And I also did like a very small part of it was doing commissions, which I always wanted to do more of, but I never felt I had enough time to do.
Let's put a pin in this little tidbit of information and advice is to be authentic to what feels good for you. It kind of reminds me of being in a new relationship when you're pretending like you're somebody that you think that they're going to want in the relationship, but it's not sustainable.
Yep.
I think that kind of translates in art too. If they're making something that's you, it's not sustainable and it's not going to be as fulfilling for them. They might get some sales at the beginning because what you do is, does resonate with people, but ultimately they don't have, there's not going to be much of an evolvement as an artist past that. In terms of doing things, like in-person events and selling on Etsy and doing direct to consumer and having stockists, there's a couple things I saw on your website, which I think a couple terms, some vocabulary that I want you to tell us what that means. And one of them is bulk gifting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. So usually it's more around holiday time. If someone, I've done this for hotels, for businesses, for weddings, you name it. But like, let's say you have like an event and you want to give out gifts, like going on my website and buying 100 of something at retail price is going to be really costly. So if you come to me and you're like, I'm essentially putting in the equivalent of not quite a wholesale order, but if you're buying in bulk, so if you're buying like large quantities of like the same design or whatever, usually I like have packaging and I do things a little bit differently, and I price it differently so that people can buy a large quantity of something and do as gifts.
That's great. That's a really specific avenue that a lot of people aren't considering doing, and I think it's really smart.
Oh yeah, I see like I've seen other people talk about their business or even like when because I've done so many like of these different like craft fairs, and like I've talked to different artists, they're really happy being like not growing their business past a certain point. They don't, it's a lot. I mean, it is a lot to like, like I'm a corporation, like I have payroll, I have insurance, like I have a lot of expenses, there's a lot of like admin that I do to run my business. And it's not for everyone. It's not what everyone wants to do. Some people just want to be like, live the dream of like working out of their garage or in their home studio and selling stuff on Etsy. And that's great. Like God bless you, like go do that. I just knew I wanted to do bigger things, and I wanted to have like a much different experience with my career, so I do the bulk gifting. I do the custom interiors. A friend of mine started a business where she reps brands for a lot of commercial work, and she, a lot of them are furniture brands, but she wanted some other type of artist to really round out her portfolio. And so she brought me on. And she had kicked a job to me years prior that took like 4 years in the making. And it's how I did that large scale, like screen that's for that Cumulus
Yes.
live work thing. Like,
And
that's
for those of you who are listening to this in audio format, please check the YouTube channel because we'll be showing photos of all of this.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, because I'll send you some more stuff. But like, so something like that, like that's like suddenly like I'm in talks with like architects and like designers and engineers, and like again, because I live in LA and I know a lot of people in a lot of different industries. I got hooked up with these like rad fabricators. They do a lot of stuff for like TV and film. And because of where we live in Shadow Hills, I'm not far from like a lot of like prop studios and stuff. So a lot of those people. And so we started working on this project together, and like also now have like other projects we're working on. And that's how like that came about. But that was like 4 years in the making, and
be patient.
Like be patient.
Yeah.
And also I have to say, it's like, so much of like my career, like I say yes to things, and I'm confident in my ability to execute. And so like, I'll say yes to things. Like I said yes to that job before we had bought our house that we're in now. And I was basically at that time looking for like an alternative studio space to have been able to actually make it, because my old studio was like 200 square feet. And even doing that, like in my, 2-car garage was like comical. Like every workbench was like covered. And that job, like I ended up having to work on it like at the end of December and beginning of January. So like going back to like work-life balance and sacrifices, like there was no vacation, there was no nothing, like I just did it. And, but, yeah, I'm trying to think.
Well, collaborations is a huge thing in terms of broadening your horizons and where you can be and how you're making your money. And you've done a collaboration with Dime Nails. Do you want to tell us about that?
Oh yeah. So, they're like such good people that unfortunately, because of the pandemic, they were a nail shop and they ended up folding. But, they came to me with this like amazing idea. What they did is they would have different like artists do installations at the nail shop. It was such a great place. I'm so sad that they closed. And so she basically was like, have at it, like do whatever you want with our window. She was so smart. Right. But like, we took it like a step further. It was like when I really started getting into doing a lot of like kiln work and doing fused glass. And so I was working with like confetti, and I was making these like mobiles for the store. And she was like, had one of her nail artists look at my work, and we came up with like Debbie Bean nails, where it was like she like mimicked the confetti from the glass. I never get my nails done, and I had them give me like a Debbie Bean manicure.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh, this is why people spend so much money on their nails. Like it was amazing. Like I went out and people were like, oh my God, your nails. I was like, I know.
They're Debbie Bean.
So like that, it's just, I just think so much of like what's happened is part of it is I'm not afraid to tell people that like I want to do things. And the other part of it is just like, I don't know, like I just feel fortunate that like I know a lot of people, and like I know a lot of people in a lot of different industries, and I'm willing just to be like, hey, if you ever want to do anything, let me know. And vice versa, people come to me like poster child prints. Sonia, I had sent her like a holiday card, and I always do all my graphic design. And she was like, oh, have you thought about doing posters? And I'm like, well, yes, I have. And so I partnered with them and did like these limited edition prints. There's still a couple available. I had wanted to do some textile work. So I knew someone, and they had like, it was like a gift card business, but they also had pillows. And so I came up with designs for pillows. I'm really willing to like push the limits on like what I can do like with my designs, and like not just limit myself to just working with glass, and like seeing
Yeah.
what else I can do. And like you said, like these fabricators that I work with, we're now working on like some much bigger projects.
I feel like throughout
Yeah.
this interview, I haven't said much, but I've been nodding emphatically the whole time because you've given so much good information and such good tips, especially for somebody starting out. Um, do you have, where do you see yourself going from here? Like, do you have any goals of things to
Always.
accomplish moving forward? Yeah,
Yeah,
tell us about
always.
those.
I think that that's actually where we were touching on like collaborations. You know, the big thing that happened for me last year was, you know, when I lost overnight, when I lost 2/3 of my business, you know, I had to kind of rethink about what I was doing and how I was doing it. Emmy, my assistant, ended up working remotely. I had to completely restructure like my workflow to have her working remotely and understanding like when work comes in, how much glass am I going to cut down, like all this stuff. So, and then the other thing is because I wasn't doing these craft fairs, like all these commissions that I always was like, oh, I'd love to do that, I have no time, I actually started doing.
Cool.
And then like that big screen that I did for the Cumulus district, you know, that ended up happening. And then unfortunately, a friend of mine died, and I had collaborated with him on an installation years ago. And I went back to my fabricators and I was like, I have these 3 panels that I want to redo in the same way that I did that big screen. And we created this steel frame for it, and we reinstalled it over at Jackknife Records. And actually we're going to redo like the whole proper installation. So all that being said, like my future goals is, you know, now that I'm not doing these like in-person events, I want to do, which is what I've been doing, which is more of the commission work, more of the commercial work. You know, a lot of the work that I'm doing with like Denver Enterprises is like working on like, you know, more higher end pieces, like still have like my retail line. Like I still have like this affordable line of like everyday household items that people can, you know, buy for their home or their office or whatever. But like, I'm, you know, like Alexander Calder is like one of those artists that like always like made like my brain explode from like since I was a little kid. And like his playful nature of like making like these sculptures to like the circus that he did. And like I feel like now that like I have this like whole side of my business going, like I really want to do more of like the experimental, more of the larger scale works, more of the, you know, artist works. And so like that's the kind of stuff that I'm focusing on for the future, is
Cool.
doing more of those. And that's actually like a lot of like what my time has been focused on. Like it's crazy over the past few months, the amount of like commissions that I've done for homes. We actually took a few days off a few weeks ago, and like I was like, why am I so tired? And then I looked and was just like, oh, right, because the amount of like custom work that I had done for all these homes that like I'm still waiting for like to get photos of. But like I also did you know, for a store that carries my work, Somatic Good Fortune. They've been around forever, and they do a lot of like really high-end jewelry, but then they also have like home goods, and then there's a tattoo shop upstairs. And when we were talking last year, I think it was, we were talking about me doing something custom for their shop, and then the world exploded. And then it came back to her. I was like, wait a minute, I still want to do that. And like that just got completed, and got photos of that installed, and it's kind of amazing. I really love how it turned out.
Okay,
So
well, again, if you
yeah.
guys are listening to this, pop on over to YouTube. I'm going to post all these photos of what she's talking about. Well, this has been so amazing. I mean, your story, you know, over the last 7 years, you started selling stained glass sun catchers out of your trunk at a yoga studio. And now, you know, when I was doing my research in preparation for this interview, I obviously had to Google you and look up as much as I could find. And I found over 42 interviews and features. I've so many gift guides you're in all over the world. And these are big names too. I saw multiple articles in Architectural Digest, BuzzFeed, Forbes. Hi, Forbes.
Yeah,
Refinery 29, Martha Stewart, GQ. I mean, the list goes on, and you've done it. And I just thank you for sharing your journey with us. I really appreciate that.
It. No, I really, it's so fun. Like I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's all true. You know, like I said, you know, I just want to really quickly say, because when you said that, I'm like, I'm sure you get these like emails and DMs too, where people are like, do you want to collaborate with me? And what they mean is, do you want me to can you send me free work?
And I'll post. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually did a whole thing in my stories, in my highlights about this, because you have to be very specific. Yes. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, but I feel very strongly.
No. I mean, because that's because just so people know, like I'm not giving them free, like I'm not giving out my work. Like I don't know, like when I end up like in a gift guide or something, I don't know about it. Like years ago, Sunset, when I was making trays, Sunset magazine, mm-hmm. I think I actually did send them something, because they were like professionally photographing it, and then they ended up buying it. But most of the time, like when I'm like in a gift guide or like Architectural Digest, like any of these places, when they're writing about me, like I just want like people that are up and coming to know that like you don't give your work away, you know, like that is not, and like if it like an influencer is asking you to do that, technically like they actually need to tell people that like when they're promoting it, that they were given this in exchange. Like that is how like advertising works. So people know that this isn't like an organic thing, like what I do when I'm like, I genuinely love something. Like I live like in my shoes. And so I'm always like, I'm in my Sabas, but it's not because like they gave them to me. It's because like I just bought another pair.
Yeah, you
I
like legit love them.
I mean?
Yeah, that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, I just always think about that, because I just get like inundated with like, hey, or like, oh, you know, whatever, like that whole thing. So all of that press is just been like organic. So it's like I always feel bad. I'm like, I don't know what to tell people. Like I don't know. Like I think I've just been fortunate that people resonated.
I think the message is just to keep your head down, work hard, be true to yourself, and you know, people will come. I think that's the message.
I mean, that's been my experience, but like I'm constantly in awe and in deep gratitude for you know, the fact that my work really resonates with people, and I hope it continues to, because I'm going to keep doing it. So
yes, your work is so beautiful. You deserve all the shine that you're getting.
I appreciate it. Your work's I was really stoked when you reached out to me, because I was like, oh, I'm like, your work's amazing. Like the work that you do is I've been sitting here talking about myself, but just so you know, I genuinely you have like a real you have a real eye. I like the soldering that you do. I love that you really you have a very clear voice with what you're doing. It's great. I love
Thanks,
it.
Debbie.
Oh yeah, kidding me? Totally.
Do you want to be best friends?
Yes.
Okay, well, I guess we should probably wrap this up, although I could talk to you all day long.
This has been great. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, I'm going to be watching and following you along and seeing what you come up with next. I know you're going to surprise us.
Same. Yeah, I have some projects I'm finished and hopefully they'll get photographed soon and I can keep sharing with people.
Cool. Let's do it.
Sounds good.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye. To see more of Debbie's work and to see what she'll be up to next, you can follow her on Instagram. It's at Debbie.Bean. DEBBIE.BEAN. And my Instagram is at Runa Glassworks. RUNAGLASSWORKS. You can also watch this interview and you can see images of all the places and the people and the art that we're speaking about. That should be pretty easy to find. Just do a search on YouTube for Cracked with Siobhan Aris. Art is such a visual experience that we really wanted to provide a video as well. So if you have a sec, check that out. I also just wanted to say that I just released my first episode with Neely Cooper. And I gotta tell you, y'all just really drove home why I wanted to do this. It validated for me the need for this podcast, all of the messages and the posts and the stories I saw. It was wonderful. So thank you. Thank you for listening. And you know what I'm going to say next. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Sorry, I have to say it. Anyway, that's it for today. I'll see you soon.